Hello and welcome back everybody to the Foodbuild factory, where today we're going to take a look at the Equalizer, aka the Enclave Soldier Mark II, and that's the absolute chat you can see on screen right now. And as always, I'm going to show you some gameplay in the first half of the video, and in the second half of the video we're going to take a look at the perks, mutations, equipment, and everything else. So let's get right into it. What this character is going to be about is we are going to play as a full health vats heavy gunner using the plasma caster, as you can probably already tell at this point. And to be more precise, what I wanted to do here is basically revisit a pretty old build of mine. It was really one of the first builds I have ever released, or videos I have ever released. And basically, back at the time, um, the plasma caster was a completely new thing, and with maybe the exception of a Gatling gun, I think this was for at least a hefty amount of people the first heavy weapon they ever considered using in vets. For good reason, that is. Usually, heavy weapons don't really couple very well with vets to begin with, and in addition to that, power armor also isn't the best premise when it comes to vets builds, while heavy gunners, well, they really benefit from being in power armor just because stabilized is such a good perk. And overall, I really enjoyed the build as it was back in the day. It was really effective in my opinion, and I really love the plasma caster. It's one of those weapons I do actually show off quite commonly on this channel. This is probably like the fourth time I actually show one off. But yeah, I still found that I really wanted to revisit the build for one simple reason. Back when the weapon came out, the Plasma Caster, legendary perks weren't a thing yet. So that was just something that was to be released at a later point, or introduced, better to say. And in addition to that, a Vet's power armor heavy gunner, that's actually quite a specific build and requires a lot of compromise for the simple reason that um, yeah, you do actually have a lot of different stats you want to invest into quite heavily. Uh, or to be more precise, you just don't really have a dump stat, to be honest. That's basically it. Because you want to have some strength just because that's where the heavy gunner perks lie. You obviously want to have some perception just because while there aren't the best perks for the most part when it comes to this weapon here, yeah, you just want to have some VATS hit chance going on. And then we go over to endurance, which shouldn't at least shouldn't be a dump stat just because while we are in power armor, um, yeah, we are very loud and proud. We always going to take hits, and we want to be at least a little bit tanky unless we want to burn through a lot of stim packs. Then we go over to charisma, which while it isn't the most important perk stat for this build, there's just some very good perks in charisma that you basically always want to have, or at least at the most times. Think about tenderizer. While it is just 3 perk points, yet again, it's not really a dump stat in any ways. Then we go over to intelligence, which you want to have to be relatively high, just because, yeah, at least you want to have stabilized, and you want to consider stuff like maybe gun nut or something, gunsmith, sorry. And after all, since you are already burning fusion cores quite fast, I think, yeah, power user is kind of a must-have when it comes to this build. So yet again, you want to have at least some solid amounts of intelligence going on. And lastly, we go over to agility and luck, which just because you are a VATS character, you want to be just pretty high. So yeah, you basically see where I'm going with this. It's just a build that with the base amount of perks that you'll be able to get your hands on in the base game, you'll have a relatively tough time to complete. And while it's definitely possible, there's just so much room for improvement. And nowadays, with the addition of legendary perks, which means you can have a ton of extra perk points, this build is actually super viable and can be a lot of fun. And by the way, just in case, because I'm hearing a holiday scourge, yeah, as it's custom at this point, I am on a private server. sorry, on a custom world, just so I can really go for some specific weapon and armor that I otherwise would have to grind all the time. Now, still, a lot of my equipment comes from open servers and everything, but just to finalize my builds a little bit more, I go over to these kind of worlds. And yeah, I pretty much said everything I wanted about the whole premise of the build, I guess. And yeah, so let's talk a bit more about it in depth. Obviously, I do really like the aesthetics, and one thing that also worked pretty perfectly is just the release of this super cool power armor skin, the Equalizer skin, which fits perfectly for a Enclave Soldier Mark II. We are now the enhanced version, using, I wouldn't say a better plasma caster, but definitely some better armor and some better equipment. We're just more powerful, to be honest. And while we usually use vats on these guys, we just have to initiate combat beforehand. We can't really vats them, and that's when free aim comes into play. I really wanted to make a free aim plasma caster build for a while now, because while I have shown this weapon off, yeah, as I said, 4 times now, it's always been VETS characters as far as I remember. But that's just where I think the weapon shines. It can definitely perform well outside of VETS, but yeah, as I said, I wanted to recreate the Enclave Soldier, and that's why there was basically no real option. Now, oddly enough, it looks like we have level 50 enemies here. I'm not quite sure why. Usually they are higher, so maybe on this occasion we don't really see any high-level robots. But to be fair, since we are in power armor, the most dangerous thing about robots is probably the Soltron running around here. And when you are in power armor, as you can probably imagine, I do have electric absorption as a legendary perk, so that guy wouldn't be too much of a trouble anyway. And fighting robots works really well with this build, just because VETS in general works well against them. Uh, since, yeah, you can just target the thrusters, the combat inhibitors, you can just really target the weak spots, which makes them way less of a threat. And when it comes to the weapon, another thing you may have noticed at this point, especially if you have bothered using the plasma caster in the past, um, pretty much always when I see people use it, they go for the aligned sniper barrel. Now, when it comes to all of the bullion weapons, which you buy for gold, there's a pretty common theme there, which just basically says that, yeah, you see these kind of weapons kitted out very evenly on different characters, just because it's not like with other weapons where over time you just unlock all the equipment just by all the mods just by scrapping them. You actually have to buy them, so you look up online what to buy or do your own kind of research. But yeah, most people go for the Aligned Sniper Barrel just because typically Aligned stuff is the best for VETS builds, since you do typically use less AP, which in case of the Aligned Sniper Barrel on this weapon is also the case. You do use less AP per shot, but other than on a lot of weapons, I've found that the difference in accuracy between a true barrel and a aligned barrel is actually quite high. The true barrel actually just doubles your VATS accuracy. Sorry, not VATS accuracy, your accuracy. Um, which is definitely a significant improvement. Now, typically the difference between a aligned barrel and a true barrel, we are talking about something like, let's just say, 85 accuracy on a rifle with the aligned barrel, and then you have maybe 90 accuracy with the true barrel. And at that point, aligned definitely is the better option. But when it comes to this weapon here, yeah, the improvement is pretty crazy. We're talking like 38 with an aligned barrel and like 60 or so with a true barrel. I really just pull these numbers out of my arse at this point, by the way. But yeah, just from what I vaguely remember, I think you get the point. That's why I nowadays run with the true capacitor and true barrel for this weapon. Because, yeah, while you do use a little bit more AP, AP generally isn't really the problem, in my opinion. We don't even have a less VATS cost version or anything. Um, I do actually have an armor set that gives me a lot of AP refresh, so we're covering that. But even without it, I would rather go for hit chance with this weapon and better accuracy rather than to go with the aligned barrel. On this particular occasion, it might not even be that bad of a decision to go with the aligned one, just because we do also have 50% better VATS hit chance on our weapon, so we're already quite precise. But still, I wanted to go all in on hit chance, because, yeah, while we do have access to legendary perks at this point, it's still not that we have like 20 perception or something like you would possibly have on a rifleman character, just because there isn't a lot of useful perks in perception. While you could definitely amp up your perception pretty high, uh, yeah, at a certain point it just becomes redundant because the little extra you get out of it is just a bit more VATS accuracy, not really any crazy amount of good perks. Uh, Pretty much you're covered with concentrated fire, and after that you really go for stuff like glow sight and exterminators and so on. Yeah, anyways, it's a bit of a long explanation as to why I went for this barrel here. It's just, yeah, probably you saw it with the aligned barrel in the past, or in other weapon showcases, and that's perfectly viable, definitely not a bad decision. Just, yeah, I wanted you to understand my reasoning here behind my weapon of choice. And yeah, another thing you maybe noticed, I mean, the gameplay really speaks for itself. It's a very solid weapon. We can one-shot pretty much everything, maybe two-shot stuff. We obviously fall a bit flat when it comes to stuff like the Scorched Beast, but on this occasion I went with an instigating version of the weapon, which I find quite nice for farming and stuff. And as you saw there, even when we were fighting the Scorched Beast, it's not like we were having any trouble or were taking ages to finish. It still went relatively smoothly. It's just, yeah, having an Aristocrats version or an anti-armor, even Furious isn't too bad. Obviously not the best one. Not even mentioning Bloodied, that's just a given. Bloodied is always pretty much the best. Yeah, there's way better performance to be had here. I had a Mutants version, which was kind of fun, um, but it's just Mutants. So I wanted to go with Instigating on this occasion. Instigating, that's hit chance and reduced weight. Now I will just make one more little trip around this courtyard, just because I always overlook enemies here. Uh, but on this occasion, I think there's a good chance we actually hit them all and can actually, yeah, go over the perks and everything in a bit more quiet uh, space than usual. But yeah, that was basically it. In terms of fusion cores, obviously that's something I haven't really talked about too much. You are burning through fusion cores relatively fast, but since it's a semi-automatic weapon, it's actually manageable in my opinion. If you're a late game player, I mean, you're not necessarily swimming in fusion cores, but yeah, burning like 5 of them an hour shouldn't be too much of a problem here. And look at this bad boy. I really dig the looks here. And well, anyways, that was the gameplay part of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it, guys, and just show these cool purple headlamps. They don't really come off as too purple on this build here, on this power armor skin, but anyways. Yeah, we're now going to take a look at our perks and everything. Starting off with our mutations. So one thing you can see here, I will show it off when we go over the equipment. We do have the targeting matrix, which is a modification for our power armor helmet, giving us yet a bit more VATS accuracy, which is kind of nice. We are suffering from bone worms, but taking 50% more limb damage just doesn't matter if you are in power armor and take no limb damage whatsoever. And yeah, then we look down here and we see that we do have bird bones, eagle eyes, electrically charged, marsupial, and speed demons. So on this occasion, actually very bare bones. We don't have a lot of mutations, just 5 of them. And arguably one of them is completely necessary. So, in my opinion, you can completely cover it with 4 mutations, and those ones are Bird Bones, Eagle Eyes, Marsupial, and Speed Demon. Bird Bones and Eagle Eyes, pretty prominent combination when it comes to Vets characters. Extra agility, perception, nice for Vets gameplay, bit more Vets hit chance, few more action points to use in Vets, and lastly, a bit more crit damage is always nice. Then we do have Marsupial, which is just beneficial on pretty much every single build. Once you have getting used to this kind of jump height, you don't really want to live without it anymore. And the extra carry weight is obviously a nice thing. And lastly, we do have the Speed Demon mutation. Faster movement speed in and of itself is worth it, no matter what, for this mutation, in my opinion. But in addition to that, reload speed is always nice, and especially on this character here. Um, the weapon we are using has a relatively small ammo capacity. We are talking about 20 shots, and while it is enough for a lot of situations, uh, you do find yourself reloading the weapon relatively often. And while it's not a age-long reload or anything, yeah, improving on the reload speed definitely is a nice thing. The mutants version I was talking about earlier was a mutants that's hit chance faster reload version, and coupling the speed demon mutation uh, with the sorry lock and loaded perk and the faster reload legendary effect makes for some really entertaining reloads. Going over it, we now take a look at our weapon itself. This is an instigating, vats hit chance, reduced weight plasma caster. I haven't really talked too much about the legendary effects so far. Now, when it comes to primary effects, obviously there's nothing too crazy here. The usual stuff is good. Anti-armor, bloodied, aristocrats, instigating is pretty good on this weapon here. But you can get away with pretty much everything. It's just a very powerful weapon to begin with, so yeah, you don't really have to focus on the first effect too much unless you're really trying to optimize your build. Um, I personally am mostly interested in the secondary effect on this weapon because there are a few options that can really add to it. My personal favorite is the one you can see here, Vats hit chance, just because, yeah, it's really unlikely that you have a super dedicated perception build when it comes to using this weapon here. So while you can definitely hit reliably in Vats, without Vats hit chance, you will always find yourself missing a few shots here and there, which can be relatively frustrating. It's not the end of the world, but I think it's just way more satisfying to get more consistent hits, especially on this weapon for some reason. And yeah, that's why I went with Vats hit chance. Other than that, obviously, Vets crits, extra Vets crit damage would be a very nice effect for this weapon here. Faster fire rate, also pretty underrated for the plasma caster, in my opinion, but I really like it. It seems to perform better than just giving you a 25% fire rate boost for some reason. On the plasma caster, it works really nicely. And yeah, that's the 3 ones I really like. Now, it would be fun if there would be an explosive version of this weapon, but yeah, no, no. There's never been any explosive plasma caster. At least I have never seen one, and from all the rules that are existing, there shouldn't be. Would be interesting though. And lastly, we do have reduced weight. Now, really not the optimal perk. Ideally, I would like to see less VATS cost or faster reload on this weapon. Other than that, the only other option I was interested in, and this was kind of my initial approach with this build, but ultimately I decided against it for no particular reason, to be honest. Um, you know my little trick, or well, my little trick. Um, Getting the Vets crits meter filling faster legendary effect as a third effect. So you can, with 23 luck, get a crit on every second shot using a combination of critical savvy, that particular legendary effect, and 23 luck. Um, it's possible nowadays with the power armor character, just because you can roll luck on power +1 luck on power armor pieces now, since they can be legendary, and that makes for a very, very powerful build, having a lot of DPS to it. I actually fiddled around with something like that in the past, but yeah, I wanted to go for a bit more well, not sure how to say, a bit more grounded solution on this occasion. So just pretty straightforward, good VATS build for the plasma caster. As you can imagine, simply by having another plasma caster, you can do way more damage. And yeah, that's it. We do have a true capacitor, as I said, true long barrel, just because liked the accuracy boost, and we are at accuracy 75. So that's something you will notice. The accuracy stat isn't too crazy on this weapon, despite it being more like a sniper rifle kind of build, kind of weapon. Sorry. And other than that, yeah, to my knowledge, there's only the standard side, and yeah, when it comes to the capacitor, there's a few options. Prime, obviously a nice thing. If you can prime it, and at least I think there's a prime receiver. Um, but yeah, I'm pretty sure there's one. The pulse capacitor is kind of useless, to be honest. It's a fun little gimmick if you use it on a plasma rifle or pistol, but with a flamer. But when it comes to the plasma caster, I would never bother with it because it just does extra damage to power armor, which is just something you rarely encounter, and even then, enemies in power armor are pretty useless, in my opinion. So yeah, how's it called? Calibrated capacitor exists for extra crit damage. It's that if that's the route you want to go down, but yeah. Probably the more typical combination you see is the calibrated capacitor with the aligned long barrel. And just to stick with the theme of this channel, I wanted to go for something else and focus on the accuracy stat for once. Then we go over, maybe we'll show off the readout speed I was talking about here with the Mutants version. And here you can see quite the fast animations. It's viewed in third person. Pretty funny, but just a nice little gimmick. It's not necessary. And when it comes to our armor, we do have a set of 2-star XO1 armor. All of them have the AP refresh effect, which is kind of overkill. Probably about 3 pieces would be enough, but you will see we don't have a lot of other stuff boosting our AP refresh. Then we do have our helmet, which, as I said earlier, has the VATS matrix overlay. In terms of the arms, we do have no mods whatsoever, just because the only ones that exist either boost our unarmed damage or give us less AP cost for power attacks with melee weapons. So yeah, in terms of arms, as always, there's nothing here. Both pieces are mutants, which is kind of irrelevant in the terms of resistances, just because we are so high anyways. Those 20 more don't really do anything to us. Then we do have one Mutant Slayer's piece. It's a leg with AP refresh, as I said, and 2 cloaking pieces. I mean, they are cloaking pieces, so in all reality, they are 1-star powered pieces. And yeah, the legs are calibrated shocks just to give us more carry weight. And yeah, that's basically it when it comes to the equipment, and let's move on to our perks. So first off, we do have strength at 9. I went for rank 2 in all the heavy gunner perks. That's enough for me. Obviously, if you have access to more legendary perks or so, you can just go up to 12 strength and just max them out for a little bit more damage. I felt like rank 2 was enough here though. And as a last effect, we have lock and load at rank 3. I mentioned it earlier. While reloading isn't a particular trouble on this character, it's definitely some consistent inconvenience you have to bother with. And yeah, lock and load, very beneficial on this occasion. I really liked it, but feel free to go with whatever you like. Then we do have perception, and as I said earlier, I try to get it high just to have a little bit of a passive bonus from it in terms of our VATS accuracy. And really, the only perk that really particularly strikes out as a good perk is Concentrated Fire at rank 3, just to give us more VATS accuracy on consecutive hits. So sooner or later, we will hit our target if we don't hit it on the first try. And more importantly, rank 1 is there just to give us the ability to target specific weak spots. Go for headshots, go for thrusters on Mr. Gutsies, and you know the thrill. Go for the belly when it comes to Deathclaws and so on. The rest here I try to fill with perks that In the past, I have used relatively often when I made pistol builds, just because they suffer from a similar problem where you want to have some perception going on, but really the only beneficial perks there are, if you go for vats, concentrate fire and tank killer. So you want to have a little bit going on here. What I do, I have exterminator. It's a very situational perk, but especially once you're fighting stuff like Mylar Kings and Mylar Queens, I am pretty sure similar to the Exterminator's legendary effect, that Mirelurks are covered as insects for some reason. So yeah, ignoring 75% of armor of any insect is nice. Basically, also helps with red scorpions and so on, even though they are yet again no insects. But you know what I'm talking about here. It's a very situational perk, but at least it gives us some benefit here or there. Then we do have Glow Sight. This is a bit more, or a little bit less situational, I would say. There are some very good events where you encounter a lot of glowing enemies, talking about Uranium Fever, for example, or nuke zones are a perfect example if you want to nuke White Springs area to farm some XP. This is a very beneficial perk just because it basically makes it so you're still fighting glowing ghouls like they are, yeah, similar to standard level 75 ones. So yeah, this one I definitely like more than Exterminators. And lastly, I just used 2 of my perk points to use awareness. A perk I very rarely use, and on this occasion, it's not that we change our gameplay by using awareness. It's not that we carry a few different weapon types, so we can technically use awareness by seeing the different resistances of enemies and swapping to the weapon that would be most beneficial to use against that character, but rather it's just there because every now and then I do like to use awareness, just bringing me up to the newest state of the game, which level of enemy has which kind of resistances. While you do generally get a very good feeling of these kind of things just from playing the game, it's nice to see it for once. It gives you a little bit more of a tactical feeling. It's just 2 perk points after all, which still benefit us just by raising our perception a little bit. And yeah, it gives you a little bit more of this super soldier vibe, in my opinion. I like it. Not for everyone, though. Then we go over to endurance, which is at 7, so fairly mediocre, pretty much exactly in the middle there, as much as possible. We do have life giver just to give us a little bit more HP overall, and then we do have fireproof. Fireproof is always a good perk to use, especially in power armor since you don't have access to dense armor pieces. No, you could obviously roll some pieces with explosive resistance, however, they would occupy the same perk slot as our powered pieces, so we would lose out on AP refresh, and therefore, yeah, fireproof definitely the best option when it comes to this here build. Then we do have charisma. This is a pretty straightforward one. Tenderizer rank 3, you'll always see it. So one thing that's kind of interesting about this build is it's kind of shaped like a pyramid, which is a bit satisfying for me at least, with Charisma being the lowest stat exactly in the middle, rank 3 Tenderizer. After all, we're trying to one-shot a lot of enemies, but especially once we're not able to, the gap usually is pretty high, meaning that enemies we can't deal with in 1 or 2 shots, usually we need like 10 shots and above for. Talking about Scorch Beast, Sheep Watch, you get the thrill. So yeah, Tenderizer is definitely not without its use, even though this is one of the weapons where it's not at its peak performance, just because we fight one singular pellet, so we do get 10% multiplicative damage, but not get basically the hidden effect of its stacking when using something like a shotgun or so. Long story for Tenderizer, but yeah, we use Tenderizer here, as always. Then we do have intelligence, and this was one where, yeah, ideally I would have loved to use Gunsmith, just because the weapon isn't the most durable one in the world, so you definitely will have to repair it every now and then. But yeah, what I went with here is obviously stabilized is the most important one, giving us 45% armor penetration with our weapon. So that's very nice. Basically, more damage against pretty much every single enemy. and more accuracy, which is also nice. Then we do have batteries included, pretty much a must-have here. Plasma cartridges tend to be really heavy. They stack up crazily. Now, when it comes to the plasma caster, you could get away without it just because you can get away with carrying just a little amount of plasma cartridges with you. But ultimately, yeah, if you want to carry anything more than like 3 to 500 with you, which I would just do out of convenience, batteries included is a must-have. And in addition to that, keep in mind you're running through fusion cores relatively fast, so you want to carry at least a few of them. And yeah, batteries included is a pretty straightforward pick in my opinion on this occasion. And that leaves us with power user, which, as I just explained, we are burning through quite a few fusion cores, and this makes it so we can halve that. Like, we can double the duration of our fusion cores, meaning they last us twice as long, which is a very beneficial thing if you are running through fusion cores relatively fast, as you can imagine. We could double down on this a little bit more by not using calibrated shocks on our legs, but using cooling vents for 5% less fusion core drainage each. And then maybe we could throw in a repair bobble head. As you can see, if you look on the far right to lock, I actually have one perk point, had one perk point left, which I used for Curator. So if we were to have a repair bobblehead, we could get the benefit of it for 2 hours rather than a single one. So yeah, the capabilities are there, but ultimately I didn't find it worth it on this occasion. Then we go over to agility, which is not quite maxed out, but pretty much as close to being maxed out as possible without considering like going above 15 with legendary perks. We do have 14 agility. Action Boy, this is pretty straightforward. You could probably live without it just because we have 5 pieces of powered gear. But yeah, just in case, a little bit more AP refresh yet is nice on this kind of character. Then with Born Survivor, and to be honest, um, you really gotta try to find useful perks here. So let's start from the bottom here with Adrenaline. This is a pretty straightforward pick I always have, and especially on this occasion, as I just said, it's not like the agility tree is riddled with perks that are particularly useful to this build. It's in fact a pretty similar situation going on to Perception, where we want the stat to be relatively high, just because for our gameplay using vats, um, high agility is good. But in terms of the perks, it's not too crazy. Like there are some obvious picks, as I said, Action Boy, Adrenaline for extra damage, and Gun Fu. Those three were pretty straightforward. But to be honest, at that point, I was kind of lost as to what to use, but still wanted to have relatively high agility. So I went with rank 3 of Born Survivor, which is a little bit overkill, but ultimately it just makes sure we're never going to die, basically, unless we are swarmed by like 7 Ballistic Mr. Gotsis or um, getting damage over time stacked on us from multiple directions, from Myler, Kings, and Queens, and so on. But yeah, every other situation basically is covered by getting a Stimpak automatically at 40% health. So yeah, and really, if I had to max out agility here, the last perk point, I wouldn't really know what to use it for, to be honest. There are a few perks I would usually use when I was not in power armor that are just universally good but not overpowered, talking stuff like Marathoner or White Knight and so on. But yeah, a lot of the agility perks don't really work when you are in power armor, so yeah, that's what I went for in agility. And now we're going to take a look at luck, which I wanted to have maxed out just because, as you know, we are a power armor character. So yeah, we do have 15 luck. Grim Reaper Sprint, this is a pretty obvious choice. While we do have relatively fast AP refresh, or pretty fast AP refresh, I gotta say, um, Grim Reaper Sprint is always a nice pick if you are using that, just to give you a chance to refill your action points. And on this weapon, yeah, you gotta see it like this. On average, you should be able to refresh your AP within 3 kills, and you can pretty solidly get 3 kills out of one round of bats AP with this weapon. So there's a good chance you will refill your AP bar with Grimbur's Sprint sooner or later. Then we do have better criticals. This is pretty straightforward. I don't think I have to explain to you while on a vats crit build we want to have better vats crits. So I'm not going to talk a lot about it. We do have Starch Genes, which is just an obvious pick. We always have to use it to keep our mutations and not get any new ones. It's just, yeah, find a solution, Bethesda. I'm kind of bored to like be so dependent on Starch Genes. Then we do have Critical Savvy and Quick Hands. Now, Critical Savvy, this is the really straightforward pick when it comes to legendary perks. When it comes to perks for VETS gameplay. Yeah, basically with 15 luck as we have it, that means every third shot or every third hit in VETS is a critical hit. You from there on have to improve your luck up to 23 and get a certain legendary effect, like as I said earlier, 15% faster VETS crits on your weapon in order to get it on every second shot, or you really pump your agility, your luck up to 33, which I'm pretty sure without buffs from food and chems is kind of impossible in power armor. So yeah, no real point here to use something else. Now we could have went for stuff like maybe Four Leaf Clover or Psychopath would have definitely been kind of useful, just to get an ever so slightly more bigger amount of crits going on. But ultimately, I felt that we were doing very solid damage. So rather than going for extra VETS crit chances, I went with Quick Hands here, just so we have a chance to automatically reload our weapon every now and then when we empty our magazine. It's just a little bit of convenience, but can be funny if it happens. You do have very good other pick options. We could use Ricochet just to be a little bit more tanky, but I felt we were pretty tanky to begin with. Luck of the Draw was tempting for me just because, as I mentioned, the condition of the weapon isn't the best in the world. So really feel free to use whatever you like here. Bloody Mess is always a good pick, obviously. However, yeah, as I said, we do have pretty solid damage here, so who gives? Yeah, feel free to use whatever you like here. And for the last perk point that was left over, so we had luck maxed out, I went with Curator, just because, as I mentioned earlier, repair bobbleheads can really be quite interesting, and if you happen to stumble across them in a player vendor or something, yeah, it shouldn't be too hard to keep a good stack of them. To be honest, maybe you can buy a bunch of them, like 50 or so, and think about it. If you use Curator, that's 2 hours per bobblehead. Yeah, if you can buy 50 of them, which shouldn't be too expensive, that's like 100 hours of gameplay, where you really don't have to worry about your fusion core duration. And other than that, there's pretty good magazines and so on. I can particularly remember there's one magazine that buffs heavy weapons crit damage. I'm pretty sure about that at least. So that would be very interesting. And yeah, it's just one perk point, so I think that's a good solution here. And that leaves us with legendary perks. And as you can probably imagine, as I told you a lot about it during the video, for the most part they're pretty boring. Now the interesting version here is Electric Absorption, which in and of itself isn't too interesting either, just because I use it on pretty much every single power armor build that I ever do, just because the perk is so good. Yeah, helps you with your fusion core situation, just because yeah, it recharges your fusion cores. With a chance of 13% if you are hit by energy attacks, which basically always happens when you are fought by super mutants or robots. So it happens relatively often. And in addition to that, it heals you, makes weapon enemies like Assaultrons and so on pretty much redundant. And yeah, the rest is pretty straightforward. Just a lot of perk points um, from legendary perks, and on this occasion I used none of them to increase any passives, so all of them are used for extra perk points. Not a lot to say here, and yeah, that was it. I hope you enjoyed it, guys, and yeah, I was really happy to revisit this kind of build, and with this good skin, one of the better power armor skins Bethesda had, in my opinion. Um, I think it's inspired by Frank Horrigan. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the build, guys, and see you next time. Bye.